I've had the real honour and pleasure of meeting some of you listeners and playing golf with you. And it's helped me to appreciate and realise that life is too short to play golf with or to spend your time with people who bring you down, who take energy away rather than give you energy. You can, as the famous saying goes, you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family. So think carefully about who you play golf with, why you play golf with them, and make sure you prioritise being around people who give you energy and who you enjoy playing golf with, rather than the ones that you don't or who bring you down. Welcome to Golf Yourself Healthy, the community of golfers who are unified in their belief that golf is good for you. I'm your host, Kris Lynch. Join me and invited guests as we share stories around how golf is helping us to live happy, healthy, and fulfilled lives. If you'd like to join our community, why not follow us on your podcast platform of choice and be notified of new episodes as soon as they're released. Please also check out our back catalogue of previous podcast episodes and journal articles at golfyourselfhealthy.com. Welcome to this special episode of the Golf Yourself Healthy podcast. I am riding solo this week. I have decided that for this bonus episode, I'm going to come to you, just yours truly, for a solo episode and something just to break things up, to offer you a bit of variety from the last 4 weeks of consecutive guest episodes. So really, my thought process for doing this was going right back to the start of Golf Yourself Healthy. If you are a regular listener, you're going to know this already. I know we've recently welcomed new listeners, new followers, new members of the GYH community. So welcome to all of you. So just for your benefit especially, but just as a refresher for others, at Golf Yourself Healthy, we really stand for and believe in the ability for golf to be good for our well-being and for golf to help us live happy and healthy lives. And I'm all about trying to find new and novel ways of delivering value to you, the listener, to the GYH community members. And until now, the way we've been doing that has been through regular guest podcast episodes in particular, as well as me writing the GYH Journal, which I write and release monthly on golfyourselfhealthy.com. I've been leaning in more recent times to doing solo episodes because it affords me, on the one hand, it affords me the opportunity to share my own personal life experiences. And I think Golf Yourself Healthy is also about drawing the parallels between how golf is very much like life itself. It's been said that golf is a metaphor for life, and there are life lessons that we can learn from golf and apply in any given area of our life, but the same vice versa. And so I thought that for this solo episode, I would offer you 14 reflections on golf-related reflections, which also I believe can apply in the context of your day-to-day lives as well. So this is my attempt to be offering you value and practical tips and advice and takeaways to apply in your golf and in your day-to-day life, drawing on not only personal experience, but also reflecting on recent guest episodes that we've had of the GYH podcast, and also pointing ahead to future episodes that are coming down the track. So this episode, all being well, should be going out on Monday the 9th of September. And just a heads up, we're going to have a week's gap in between that, or a 2-week gap, should I say. So this episode will go out on hopefully Monday the 9th of September, and then we'll follow that up with our next guest episode. Normal service will resume then on Monday the 23rd of September. And like I say, some of the points I touch on in this episode today will kind of point to some of those future episodes. So the whole why behind the number 14, you'll have noticed that the title of this episode is 14 Reflections. Anyone who's a regular listener to this podcast will know I'm a massive fan of wordplay, as corny as it may be. And so really the wordplay and the wordplay in the context of golf, this number 14 is important to us at Golf Yourself Healthy, because just a couple of weeks ago, the GYH podcast came in ranked at its highest ever ranking in the UK golf podcast charts, in at number 14. And that is a very proud milestone for me, for my team, Brogan, our producer, everyone concerned with Golf Yourself Healthy. And I would also say thank you to all of you listeners to help us get there. You know, that is no mean feat, because actually that positioned us at that time 3 spots behind very established, reputable golf podcasts such as the Sky Sports Golf Podcast. So that is great, and hopefully is a sign of how much value you're already getting out of this podcast. But ultimately it made me think about how, you know, whilst on the one hand that accolade or that recognition is great for my ego, for example, I really want to go beyond that and actually continuously, like I say, strive to do things, offer things with Golf Yourself Healthy that are going to make a difference in people's lives, to talk about important subjects, deep, meaningful, philosophical things that touch on both golf and life. And so, like I say, that is my hope, that in this conversation, in this episode, I say conversation, me having a conversation myself, having a conversation with you, is 14 reflections. And so let me start off with the first reflection I'm going to give you is to face your fears. And so I've thought a number of times since doing Golf Yourself Healthy about how, for me personally, the act of actually putting myself out there, creating and launching Golf Yourself Healthy, and being very vulnerable and open and bearing my soul about the loss of my son, he being the reason why I decided to do this, talking about my mental health and my struggles with mental health and alcohol and all of these things. And it really made me think about how, if I observe the people around me in day-to-day life and even in golf circles as well, it is really amazing how it is fear that holds us back from doing so much. And I have learned that actually, and I continue to learn, because even before I've clicked record and started on this episode, I feel slightly fearful about doing it. And every day that I turn up to do Golf Yourself Healthy, every day that I turn up to do life, I'm always facing a certain fear. And the moment that you face that fear head on and push through it and do things that actually make you uncomfortable, because one of my favourite sayings is there is no growth inside your comfort zone. And it is my lived and personal experience that when you stop procrastinating and you just do things that are causing you fear, and you conquer it, you achieve the thing and you conquer the fear, it is such a great feeling and it breeds confidence. And so I would say that to you in the context of both life and in golf, whatever your fears are. I mean, one example that I can think of that is really interesting, just comes to the top of my mind. Right back at the beginning of Golf Yourself Healthy, episode 3 in season 1 was with someone called Robin Chodak, and she shared this fear that she overcame when she, as a woman, was invited to play with a group of 3 men, and the very scenario caused her a lot of angst and anxiety and fear. But when she did it and had a great time in their company and actually proved to herself that she was deserving of her place on the golf course, and that was really interesting to listen to. So I would encourage you to go back and listen to that example beyond the one that I'm giving you. But facing your fears and conquering them is one of the greatest things you can do. Okay, so number 2 is to control the controllables. In the most recent episode of the podcast, season 2, episode 4 with Joe Donnelly, he shared this reflection which came out of a session with his therapist. And so the context for this was Joe, who is the CEO of a charity called TAMI, which stands for Tackling Awareness of Mental Health Issues. His why for starting that charity, and what they do as a charity, is they use sport as a power for good to introduce mental health, or rather sport as this enabler of saving lives and as a power for good, and introducing mental health and emotional well-being into sport and sports clubs. His why for starting that was because his friend Thomas, Tammy, after whom the charity is named, took his own life by suicide in 2009. And over a number of years subsequently, Joe had dedicated himself to helping others. And then in 2014, his stepfather, Seamus, took his own life by suicide. And that absolutely floored Joe. And he was left contemplating, what's the point? Why am I doing this? I feel like I've failed because of the work that I do in mental health. I couldn't save Seamus, my stepfather. And so it was so interesting what he shared about being in therapy, and his therapist saying essentially that there are situations in life that you just ultimately cannot control. And it's important that you continue and strive to identify what you are in control of and what you are not in control of. And this is so important in our day-to-day lives, just as it is important in how we show up in our game of golf as well. And whether that is between golf and life, what you can control is your intentions, your attitude, your approach to things. But you generally cannot control what other people do, what other people say. And the moment that you recognize that and don't lose sight of it, it actually sets you free. Number 3 is that golf brings you to life. I have reflected a few times on how in the time that GYH has been in existence, I have a presence on social media now, and I see a lot of golf influencers and hashtags saying golf is life. And I have to admit, I do a little bit sick in my mouth each time that I hear that, because it kind of makes me boke, as we like to say in Scotland, which is, I think it's a bit over the top to say that golf is life. And that may sound strange coming from a guy who started up a podcast called Golf Yourself Healthy and who, by his own admission, is totally obsessed with golf. But I rather prefer to look at this in such a way, which is that it's what golf does for me. Golf brings me to life. I have got to always remain cognizant of the fact that there is actually, and this maybe leads me to reflection number 4, that there is more to life than golf. And I think for any of us who love golf, play lots of it, it's always important, I think, to have other things going on in your life outside of it which give you purpose, and that you maintain perspective around the important things in your life. Because I have interviewed guests on this podcast, one being Mike Harris in the recent past, season 2, episode 2, and further down the line in season 2, you will hear an episode with a girl called Jordan Ryan, who is a qualified PGA golf coach. She used to play in the Ladies European Tour, and both of them in their own way talk about how they allowed golf at points in their life to consume them, and how it's important to have hobbies and things outside of golf so that you appreciate golf more, but then also to make sure that you're present for your family. When my baby girl comes, God willing, she's going to come into this world healthy in November this year, I have to make sure that I show up for her. I show up for my wife and for my family, and that I don't allow this, Golf Yourself Healthy, or the game of golf in general, to take over. And it's to have everything in balance. And I think if you overdo golf, actually sometimes you can maybe take it for granted. My next one, number 5, will be when things are going well, don't keep your foot to the floor. And this also came from Mike Harris in season 2, episode 2, Golf is the Spice of Life, where he spoke about how, again, in conversation with his therapist, she said to him, Mike, when things are going badly, do something about that. Take action and get yourself out of that situation, because no one else really is going to do it for you. But when things are going well, enjoy the moment. Cherish the fairway, as we like to say at Golf Yourself Healthy, because adversity will come around again at some point down the line. So enjoy it while you're there and don't overdo it. In a golfing parlance, you could look at this in such a way that says, if you've driven the fairway on a par 5 and you've got 250 yards into the green and you're a mid to high handicapper and you don't have that shot in your locker, don't try and get the green in 2. Take your medicine, lay up, and just go easy. Don't unnecessarily bring more stress and overload yourself and burn yourself out. Enjoy the moment. Number 6 is when you know how, do it. So what I mean by this is it partly goes back to the fear thing. So if I think about how the time it took me to prepare for building and launching Golf Yourself Healthy, there came a point where I just set myself a deadline and said, I'm going to go for it and I'm just going to do it. I've learned as much as I possibly can about podcasting and how to do social media and all these things. I just had to back myself just to do it. And I apply this in the golf context because an area of my game that I'm working on at the moment is the short game, the chipping especially. And chipping is something that's caused me issues before. And I've reached a stage now where I know how to chip. I've been given a process by my golf coach and I have to trust the process. And so when I find myself in both a competitive round of golf, in a practice round of golf, whatever it is, put it into practice and don't wimp out on myself or back down on what I actually know and I have a process for, because I will never achieve or learn or gain anything if I continually rest on my laurels or just stay in my comfort zone. And then number 7 then ultimately leads into when you don't know how, learn how. So going back to my golf coach example, while on the one hand he's given me a process for chipping, he said to me recently, he said, it's no good me saying to you or anyone on a golf course saying to you when you're struggling with a certain shot, just commit. Well, how can you commit when you've got nothing to commit to, if you know what I mean? You have a gap in your knowledge. And so the important thing there is don't live in the fear and the paralysis of not knowing how to do something. Go out there, take ownership and learn how to chip. Learn how to do a particular project, learn a certain skill. If that's your desire or your passion or something that is of interest to you or is going to develop you further, just go and do it and stop putting it off. Number 8 then is to embrace ambiguity. And I especially value this one because something I've learned in my professional career is that a manager of mine once said to me, Kris, you do not do well with ambiguity. It's clear to me that before you take action on something, you like to have built up a full picture and have lots of information and all the data points to hand before you pull the trigger, basically. And the reality is, I agree with that. And I look at that and think, life is such that we are going to need to take certain risks and do things that we're not comfortable with, but crucially to do things where we don't have all the information to hand. There are some unknowns. And so I've learned to embrace that ambiguity. And a bit of a novel example of this was when I recently joined my new golf club, which is a 9-hole course, which is quite primitive in many regards in terms of its resources and its standards. That course is not mapped on Arcos Golf, which is the data source that I use to help me track my shots, tell me what yardages I've got off the tee or from the fairway into the green. And when I turned up there and I just came to expect that I would have all the information laid out in front of me, I had to go and do it the old-fashioned way and just play the course blind, so to speak, without all the data. And you know what? I actually quite enjoyed it. It helped me develop a certain confidence and belief in my game, which it just goes to show that that's a great example. You know, you're not going to have all the data available to you and you're just going to have to take action sometimes. Number 9 is winning is not everything, but wanting it is. This is a quote by the great and late Arnold Palmer. And I brought up this quote in a future episode that's coming down the line with Laura Scott. Check her out on Instagram, Coaching for Success. Laura is working as a mental game coach with amateur golfers. So again, very much a group of golfers that is similar to, I imagine, those who listen to Golf Yourself Healthy, and it's a great conversation, so look out for that one when it drops. But I introduced this quote to her and I said, Laura, what is winning is not everything, but wanting it is? What does that mean to you? What did it mean to Arnold Palmer, perhaps? And so we both discussed how there is something interesting here about how if you have a will to win and a want to succeed in anything that you do in your life, that is a very healthy trait to have. However, equally, maybe going back to control the controllables, there will be times where that win has been taken away from you, or it is not within your control, or you've done as much as you can to get the win, but you maybe fell short. So as long as you turn up and apply yourself in everything that you do in golf and in life, and don't get down on yourself, you will win more battles than you lose. Number 10 is stop saying sorry. I especially love this one. So the life context for this one that's come out in the Golf Yourself Healthy podcast has been how a few of my male guests especially have, when they've got emotional on the podcast, they've cried, for instance, they've said sorry for getting emotional and they've had to compose themselves. And I've made a point of saying to them, do not apologize for that, because that is a sign of strength in my book, and it's a role model example to others out there. And so if you then apply this in the golf context, I think about something that I learned from Lee Cromwell, who is a very renowned sports psychologist working in golf especially. He works with several top elite golfers like Matt Wallace and Andy Sullivan on the DP World Tour and the PGA Tour. And I remember he said this thing about when he was working with Andy Sullivan when he was in the Ryder Cup team. I want to say it was 2016. And he talked about the importance of, when you're playing in a team environment in golf, is not saying sorry to your playing partner when you've hit a duff shot, because it brings you down and it brings them down, and it puts this negative energy around the partnership. So always lift each other up rather than bring each other down unnecessarily by unnecessarily apologizing. Number 11 is find your people. I've said this before, I've talked about this before in Golf Yourself Healthy, but truly one of the most special things I've realized in the course of doing this podcast has been not just the podcast, but the people I've met along the way in and outside of the podcast. I've had the real honor and pleasure of meeting some of you listeners and playing golf with you. And it's helped me to appreciate and realize that life is too short to play golf with or to spend your time with people who bring you down, who take energy away rather than give you energy. You can, as the famous saying goes, you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family. So think carefully about who you play golf with, why you play golf with them, and make sure you prioritize being around people who give you energy and who you enjoy playing golf with, rather than the ones that you don't or who bring you down. Number 12 is rock that handicap. It occurs to me how both myself and others that I've met on this journey who are or have been high handicap golfers are apologetic or embarrassed about their handicap. And I say be proud of it and wear it with pride, because you are where you are with your golf. That's a great thing about golf. You can always improve, you can always get better at something. And it doesn't matter what others think about your handicap. The chances are actually what you think they're thinking is not that at all. And it's often, at least I'm speaking from experience, it's in my own head. I'm telling myself 20.7 WHS is not good enough. I'm not good enough. It is good enough. It's more than good enough. It's my handicap, not your handicap. And I also like to think of my other handicaps in life, which are depression, anxiety, struggles with alcohol. I actually don't necessarily see them as defects or things to be ashamed or embarrassed of. I've learned so much about myself through those things. And similarly about being open and proud and talking about your level of ability in golf and your handicap when you speak openly and have no fear or any shame about the things that, the imperfections that you have. We're all fallible human beings. Then again, that is really inspiring to other people, and never lose sight of that. My last two, well, you probably guessed them. Number 13 and number 14 are embrace the rough and cherish the fairway, respectively. You've probably heard this if you listen to this podcast many times now, and you've wondered, what's that all about? Embrace the rough and cherish the fairway. Well, let me explain. The thinking here is that in golf, as in life, when you find yourself in the rough, we get frustrated with ourselves. We question why we got there in the first place. We want to get out of the rough as quickly as possible. But actually, it's in the rough. It's when we're facing periods of adversity in our life where the greatest life lessons come to us. And so remember that the next time you find yourself in the rough, is to not try and rush yourself out of there. Do some soul searching and look for the lessons that you can learn and take the strength from adversity so that you can cherish the fairway. And what do we mean by that? When we're in the short grass again, which is the place we all really want to be, enjoy it while you're there. Cherish the good times and those good moments in life, because heaven knows adversity, you never know when it's going to turn up again. So enjoy the good times while they're there and be grateful for the good times in life and in golf. So there you go. Those are my 14 reflections. Before we close this episode, I'd love it if you were to get in touch with me to share your own reflections based on what you've heard in this episode or throughout the course of listening to the podcast, or just in general across your golf, your life, your golf life. You can contact me, Kris, at golfyourselfhealthy.com. That email address is listed in the show notes. So at the one click of a button, you can drop me an email and get in touch, share your thoughts with me. Just as a final reminder, we'll be back on Monday the 23rd of September with our next guest episode. Make sure to follow us on your podcasting platform of choice if you have not done so already, to make sure you get notified of that episode when it drops. But until then, please always remember to embrace the rough and forever cherish the fairway.